In 1995, a tank appeared on the streets of San Diego, California, destroying everything in its path and spreading terror in the city.
The tank chase is probably one of the, if not the most dramatic events that have ever occurred that involved the San Diego Police Department.
The anonymous driver circumvented U.S. Army security using a device intended for war. Panic in the streets was unleashed as everyone wondered who could be inside that tank.
Absolutely the most hazardous thing that we have come across to date, because we just didn't know how to stop it.
Who was the man inside the tank? How did he manage to steal a device of war, and what were his motivations? This is the story of the man who bypassed the US military security and unleashed panic on the streets, terrorizing an entire city. The M60 was an American battle tank that had entered the US Army during the 1960s. More than 15,000 tanks have been built and have been in combat in the year 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, and also during the Gulf War in 1991. These were also America's main tanks during the Cold War, but during the 1990s it was replaced by the new M1 Abrams tank, and therefore the M60 was placed in Army Reserve. This is a tank with a long history of warfare in the history of the United States, which was responsible for taking the lives of thousands of people during the aforementioned conflicts. So, what was this 15-ton beast doing in broad daylight cruising the streets? The tank was fitted with the latest version of a 105mm gun and a 7.62mm machine gun. It also had a much improved fire control system, including a laser-assisted gun, and its armor was so powerful to the point that in some places it was up 30 centimeters thick. The main weapon of the stolen tank was capable of firing at an incredible distance of more than 3 kilometers with pinpoint accuracy. In addition, it was armed with a medium machine gun, which was located next to the main gun that could fire at an unthinkable speed. Despite its 30 years of age and its basic design for today, the tank was a deadly and highly efficient weapon.
Absolutely the most hazardous thing that we have come across to date.
As expected, with this device made to wipe out people and entire cities, panic in the streets was unleashed, as everyone wondered who could be inside that tank. It all started on May 17, 1995. At 6:30 in the evening on a warm summer evening, local police received a call from the California Army National Guard Armory, informing them that a tank had been stolen, as crazy as that sounds. An intense manhunt began along with state police, television crews, and helicopters. Quickly, this shocking moment began to be broadcast live on national television as the tank was traveling at 50 kilometers per hour, leaving everything destroyed in its path.
He drove over fire hydrants, park benches, street lights. He attempted to drive over citizens in their vehicles, police cars. It was such an incredible hazard to people in the street. It's beyond words.
The driver crushed and destroyed approximately 40 parked vehicles. His stunt even succeeded in cutting off the power supply to 5,000 residents in the area. Traffic was cut off to prevent more people from risking their lives. Otherwise, they would have had to face this war tank and suffer the same fate as the vehicles. Everyone on the street that day were shocked by what was happening.
So I ran out the front door, and when I did, I saw the whole street up there was in pieces. It was like a war zone.
A war tank in the middle of the street was not normal, and nobody knew what was going on or who was inside that beast. The curiosity of the street people was such that the police had to act.
We decided to use the loudspeaker to warn people to go back into their homes or to get out of the way because this guy was running over everything in sight.
This is the San Diego Police Department. Everybody get off the street and go back into your house right now.
Despite the large police presence, they were unable to stop him, as the normal tactics for stopping a tank of warfare did not apply in this case. The police still did not know whether the tank was armed or not, nor who the person inside was. In this desperation, they considered requesting the assistance of the nearby Marine Corps, who were nearby and who had Squadron AH-1 Cobra, an attack helicopter capable of destroying the tank used during the Vietnam War. But aside from the illegality of using military weaponry against a civilian on American soil, the Cobra's anti-tank missiles could miss the target and cause greater loss of life and injury to those who were on the perimeter. This was no ordinary battlefield,
because we just didn't know how to stop it.
The tank and the unknown person inside destroyed everything in its path and headed south, then stopped in front of a pedestrian bridge pillar to ram it unsuccessfully. After hundreds of attacks on vehicles of all kinds and signposts, the tank began to show its first faults. In an attempt to change direction and head north, the driver slammed into the concrete barrier that divides both directions of State Route 163 and became trapped in it. This could become an opportunity for police to put an end to the destruction.
If we can get somebody on top of it, they can probably get inside the tank, and that's probably going to be our best hope at this juncture.
Here, the police took the opportunity and used a bolt cutter to open the driver's hatch.
They opened the hatch, they ordered the driver to stop what he was doing, and they could recognize that he knew exactly what he was doing.
The subject did not follow orders, and in response continued to accelerate, moving the tank back and forth in an attempt to free it from the barrier. The police had no more options.
And when they realized he was going to get loose, they had to shoot him.
A bullet hit him right in the neck, ending 23 minutes and 10 kilometers of chaos. Only at this point would they discover who was the dangerous subject, who destroyed the streets and terrorized an entire city with his actions. The tank had been stolen by Sean Nelson, a 35-year-old man. That day, Nelson drove to the California Army National Guard Armory, which was unguarded, entered through the front door, and wandered the premises free and clear. Although there were many military personnel on duty at the time, no one seemed to notice that a civilian, ex-serviceman who knew the weaponry inside out, and who was also not in his right mind, would become a danger to the city. Nelson tried to light 2 tanks before starting the beast that would carry him into the streets, stalking hundreds of civilians. Yet, no serving military personnel noticed. These tanks don't need a key or code to start them, it's just a push of a button. On the 3rd attempt, Sean had luck on his side. It was only then that a serviceman noticed what was going on, but it was too late. Nelson pressed the accelerator without leaving any chance for the military to get in his way. Only bewilderment overwhelmed them. They pulled out of the raging tank, led by an unnamed driver, and set off into the streets of San Diego. This is when the police received a desperate call from a soldier. Born August 21, 1959, in California, he was the second of 3 kids. He attended James Madison High School, and as soon as he graduated from high school, he joined the Army in 1978. He served for 2 years and spent most of that time as a U.S. battalion tank driver in West Germany. Nelson was always getting into trouble with commanding officers and was discharged from the Army in 1980 at the age of 21 due to multifaceted disciplinary problems. During those years, his past problems apparently did not disturb him, and over the next few years, he adjusted well as a civilian. Over the years, he opened and ran a successful plumbing business, and in 1984, he married, living a peaceful life for 6 years. Everything in his life was stable until the late 80s. His business and marriage fell apart, and he started using substances. In 1988, his mother died, and in 1990, his wife divorced him after 7 years of marriage. That same year, Nelson was involved in a motorbike accident which left him with a spinal fracture, which made it difficult for him to return to a normal life. He then filed a lawsuit against the hospital for malpractice, but did not win. Nelson blamed the same hospital for his mother's death. Then, in 1992, his father, with whom they were very close, died unexpectedly. After this, Nelson drank enormous amounts of alcohol and substances in order to escape his depressing reality. 3 years later, in 1995, Nelson had serious debts to pay. His vehicle and work tools had been stolen, and his insurance would not cover the losses, causing his work to come to a complete halt. That spring, his house in the suburbs was cut off from water and electricity because he had not paid his debts, and the bank began foreclosure proceedings for not paying the mortgage for months. Nelson was now addicted to substances that he used to silence all the physical pain from his spinal fracture and the emotional pain in order to forget all his problems. Sean was completely lost and alone. Over time, Nelson became more aggressive and violent. He became emotionally unstable and began to have paranoid delusions. He even dug a hole more than 20 feet deep in the backyard of his house, believing he would find gold. In the neighborhood, he was known for his unusual behavior. His living girlfriend Michelle left him, and according to his friends, that led to severe depression and recurring thoughts of ending his life. All these episodes caused a kind of mental breakdown in Nelson that led him to steal an army tank to sow panic and chaos in San Diego, in a way to make everyone feel what was going on inside his head. But what were the motives that led Sean Nelson to break into an armory and steal an army tank? Some believe it was due to a political act, but there is no evidence of strong ideals or involvement in any political organization. Most people, including his ex-wife and brother, believe that Nelson had a serious mental breakdown enhanced by his addictions.
Was he just having fun then? Is that what it was?
Man, he had enough. He was sick and tired. He was screaming, trying to get some attention.
This event raised strong questions about the military security at the Guard arsenal and prompted changes in the storage of California tanks. The police on the scene were also questioned for not using another option to reduce Sean instead of ending his life at the age of 35.
I did what I had to do, and I'm not ashamed of what I did.
Sean Nelson was an Army veteran who was forgotten in the California suburbs. The constant exposure to the artifacts of war and violence left a deep trauma. Only 2 years in the military was enough to get him back to driving a tank after 15 years.
He was a good guy. Great brother. Good citizen. Good person to follow. We had more people like that. I miss him.
Nelson will be remembered by his family, friends, and neighbors as a good person, but who clearly needed help.
He could have done a lot more damage if he wanted to.
Fortunately, Sean Nelson didn't injure anyone in the stolen tank rampage, and he wasn't armed either, for surely taking someone's life was not his goal. Sean Nelson would die hours after the event in a local hospital overnight.